It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and Emily was walking home from school, her backpack bouncing lightly on her shoulders. She was eager to get home and dive into the book she had been reading, but as she passed the old, crumbling house on the corner, something unusual caught her eye. She stopped mid-step, her gaze fixed on a figure curled up under the thick, overgrown bush near the driveway. At first, she thought it was just another stray cat, maybe even a pile of leaves. But as she stepped closer, her heart skipped a beat. The shape under the bush was a dog, a German shepherd, its fur matted and dirty, and its body so thin that its ribs were visible beneath its coat. Its eyes, however, were what drew Emily in. They weren't the wild, fearful eyes of an animal that had been abandoned. They were tired, almost as though the dog had been through something painful, but they still held a glimmer of trust, a spark of hope. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had seen stray dogs around town before, but none of them had looked like this one. He was alone, and there was something about him that made her want to help. She glanced around the street. It was quiet. No one else seemed to be paying attention. She knew she couldn't just walk away and leave him there. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She knelt down cautiously, keeping her voice gentle as she spoke. "Hey there, boy," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. The dog's ears perked up, and his eyes flicked toward her, but he didn't move. Emily smiled at him, hoping he would see the kindness in her face. "Are you hungry?" Without waiting for an answer, she opened her backpack and pulled out the half-eaten sandwich she had brought for lunch that day. It was peanut butter and jelly, her favorite. She carefully placed it on the ground in front of the dog, holding her breath as she waited. The dog sniffed the air, his eyes studying the sandwich for a long moment. For a second, Emily thought he might walk away, but then his nose twitched, and he took a small step forward. Slowly, carefully, he began to nibble at the bread. Emily let out a quiet sigh of relief. She smiled at the dog, watching as he ate, her heart swelling with empathy. She didn't know how long he had been alone, but she knew he needed help. She could see how weak he was, how hungry and exhausted. But in that moment, as he took another small bite of the sandwich, Emily felt a deep sense of connection with him. It was as though the world had paused for just a moment, and the two of them shared something unspoken. She sat down next to him, making sure to keep her movements slow and calm. "I'll bring you something better tomorrow," she whispered to the dog, her voice soft and comforting. He didn't look up from his meal, but seemed to acknowledge her words in his own way. His tail wagged faintly, almost as if he was saying thank you. For a few minutes, Emily stayed there, watching the dog finish his food. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew she couldn't leave him there alone. She promised herself that she would do whatever she could to help him, starting with coming back the next day. The next day, Emily woke up with one thing on her mind: Shadow. She had given him that name the night before, after watching him rest so quietly under the bush. It seemed fitting, the way he blended into the shadows of the street, unnoticed by everyone else. But to her, he was special, and she couldn't stop thinking about the connection they had made the day before. After school, Emily rushed home, barely able to contain her excitement. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. She grabbed some leftover chicken from dinner the night before, carefully wrapped it up in a napkin, and stuffed it into her backpack. She also brought along a bottle of water. He must have been thirsty too. With everything packed, she hurried back to the corner where she had seen Shadow, her heart racing as she approached. As she rounded the corner, Emily's eyes searched for any sign of him. The old house seemed even quieter than usual, and the bush where Shadow had been the day before was still there, thick and wild. She paused, hoping for a glimpse of the dog. And then, as if on cue, she spotted him. There, just behind the bush, he was lying in the same spot, but this time his eyes were wide open, watching her. "Hey, Shadow," Emily called softly, her voice full of warmth. The dog lifted his head at the sound of his name, and for a moment it felt like he understood her. He didn't move at first, just watched her with those tired, wise eyes. But then, as if making a decision, he slowly rose to his feet and took a few... The following day, Emily couldn't shake the thought of Shadow from her mind. All throughout her classes, she found herself daydreaming about the stray dog. His brown eyes, the way he had cautiously approached her, and the faint wag of his tail as he accepted her kindness. It all made her heart swell with a warmth she couldn't explain. She couldn't wait to see him again, to bring him more food, and to see if he would trust her even more. After school, she rushed home, determined to keep her promise to Shadow. This time, she brought something extra. A soft, old blanket from her room that had been tucked away in a drawer. It wasn't much, but she thought it might make him feel more comfortable, especially with the cool air settling in as autumn neared. She folded it neatly, packed it in her backpack along with the food, and set off to find her new friend. As Emily neared the corner where she had first met Shadow, her heart raced with anticipation. She half expected to see him waiting in the same spot, but when she reached the bush, the area was empty. For a moment, panic set in. Had something happened to him? Had he moved on? Emily called out softly, her voice filled with worry, "Shadow, are you here?" She waited, breath held in the quiet afternoon air. Just as she was about to turn and head down the street, she heard a soft rustling sound. Her heart skipped a beat. Turning back, she saw Shadow emerging from behind the bush, his head low and cautious at first. When he spotted Emily, his eyes brightened, and he gave a faint bark, as if to announce his arrival. Relief flooded Emily's chest, and she knelt down, smiling. "Hey boy," she said, her voice soothing. "I brought you something special today." She set the blanket down gently and laid out the food beside it. Shadow sniffed at the blanket first, his nose twitching as he investigated the soft fabric. His tail gave a little wag, and he gingerly walked over to it, his tired legs moving slower than the day before. Emily watched with quiet joy as Shadow slowly settled onto the blanket, curling up with a soft grunt. He glanced at her once, then laid his head down, content and at ease. Emily felt a sense of pride in her chest. She had done something simple, but it was making a difference. For the first time, Shadow wasn't just lying in the dirt or under a bush. He had a place to rest. As he began to eat, Emily stayed close, watching him carefully. She could see the way he savored the food, as if it had been days since he had a proper meal. The bond between them was growing stronger with each passing moment, and Emily couldn't help but feel like they were forming a secret connection. One that was built on kindness, trust, and understanding. When Shadow finished his meal, Emily gently ran her fingers through his fur. "I'm glad you like it," she whispered. "I'll bring more tomorrow, and maybe we can find you a real home soon." Shadow didn't respond with words, of course, but his eyes met hers, filled with something that made her believe he understood. In that quiet, peaceful moment, Emily made a silent promise to herself, and to Shadow, that she would do everything in her power to help him. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He was a friend, and that was enough for now. As the sun began to set and the sky turned pink and orange, Emily stood up slowly, ready to head home. But before she left, she paused, taking one last look at Shadow, who had already closed his eyes and settled into the blanket. He was safe for now, and that was all she could ask for. She turned and walked back home, a quiet sense of purpose in her heart. Tomorrow she would return, and this time she hoped it would be the start of something more. The next day, Emily woke up with a sense of excitement in her chest. She had promised Shadow that she would be back, and she couldn't wait to see him again. Her morning routine felt different, like the day held something special. She made sure to pack extra food, more chicken, a little bread, and even a small bag of treats she had saved for a special occasion. Today, she was determined to show Shadow that he was important to her, that he wasn't just another stray to be forgotten. But when school ended and Emily eagerly ran down the street, something felt off. The familiar corner was quiet. She squinted down the road, hoping to see Shadow lounging by the old bush, his eyes bright and waiting for her. But there was nothing. The bush looked empty, the driveway as desolate as ever. Her heart sank. She called out softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Shadow, are you here?" Silence answered her. Emily stood there, her breath shallow, scanning the street. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. For a moment, she felt like the world had shifted just slightly, like something important had slipped away from her grasp. She took a few steps forward, hoping for a glimpse of him around the corner or under the old tree, but the street remained empty. A pang of worry crept into her chest. What if something had happened to him? What if he had wandered off, gotten hurt, or worse, been taken away by someone who didn't care for him the way she did? Emily felt a lump form in her throat, and her eyes stung. She couldn't explain why she cared so much, why this stray dog, this lonely creature, had touched her heart so deeply. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she had to find him. She walked up and down the street, calling his name again and again. Her voice cracked as she spoke, desperate now, but there was still no sign of him. She glanced around at the houses, the quiet yards, and even peered down alleyways, hoping for a glimpse of him, but the only response she received was the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The sinking feeling in her stomach grew heavier, and she finally paused, feeling defeated. "I don't know where you've gone, Shadow," she whispered to the empty street, her heart aching. She felt foolish, like she had let him down somehow. Just as she turned to head home, something caught her eye, a flicker of movement in the distance. Emily froze. There, at the far end of the street, she saw a familiar shape. Shadow. He was slowly walking down the sidewalk, his tail wagging slightly as he sniffed the air. Relief flooded through her, and without thinking, Emily sprinted toward him, calling his name once again. Shadow turned toward her, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. He barked softly, his body wagging in excitement. It was as though he had been waiting for her all along. "I was so worried about you," Emily breathed, crouching down to meet him. Shadow padded over to her, his movements slow but steady. She ran her hands through his fur, checking to make sure he wasn't hurt. He leaned into her touch, and in that moment, everything felt right again. Shadow was back, and that was all that mattered. As Emily stood up, she smiled through the lingering worry, her heart lighter. She hadn't lost him. They still had their connection. Shadow was here, and that was all that mattered. "I'm glad you're okay," she whispered, giving him one last pat before heading back home with him by her side. The fear of losing him was gone, for now. But Emily knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't stop looking after him. She couldn't. The next afternoon, Emily's excitement was palpable. She could hardly wait to see Shadow again after the brief moment of fear she had felt the day before. As she walked down the street with her backpack over her shoulder, the weight of the promise she had made to herself yesterday filled her chest. She would not let him slip away. Shadow needed her, and she was ready to show him that he wasn't alone anymore. When Emily reached the corner, she paused, scanning the old house and the overgrown bush where she had last seen him. For a few seconds, she didn't see any sign of the German Shepherd. Her heart skipped a beat, and the dread she had felt the day before began to creep back in. Had he left? Had something happened to him? She took a step forward, calling out softly, "Shadow, are you here?" Her voice trembled slightly, but she quickly shook off the nervousness. She couldn't let herself get discouraged. He had come back to her yesterday, and he would come back again. Then, from the shadows of the alley behind the house, Emily saw a familiar wagging tail. She froze for a moment, unsure if she was imagining things, but as Shadow stepped into the light, the sense of relief she felt was overwhelming. His eyes locked with hers, bright and full of recognition. Without hesitation, he bounded toward her, his tail wagging furiously. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. "Shadow!" Emily exclaimed, her heart soaring. She knelt down, arms wide open, and Shadow ran straight into her embrace, his body warm and reassuring. He nuzzled her face with his nose, his tongue brushing her cheek, and Emily couldn't help but laugh, the sound of joy bubbling up from her chest. She had been so worried about him. For a moment, it felt like everything else in the world had faded away, and there was just this moment, this reunion. She gently scratched behind his ears, her fingers feeling the softness of his fur. "I'm so glad you're okay," she whispered, her voice full of relief. But there was more. As Shadow stepped back a little, Emily noticed something strange. In his mouth, he was holding something. It wasn't food or a stick, something much more unusual. A small, worn red scarf, slightly frayed at the edges, with a little tear in one corner. Shadow dropped it gently at Emily's feet, his eyes watching her intently as if waiting for her reaction. Emily blinked, surprised. "What's this, boy?" she murmured, leaning down to pick up the scarf. It was old and had clearly seen better days, but the gesture made her heart swell. She couldn't believe it. Was this Shadow's way of thanking her? She lifted the scarf in both hands, inspecting it closely. There was something special about it. Though it was worn and a little faded, it was clear that it had meant something to someone. "Is this for me?" she asked, looking down at Shadow. The dog sat down on the ground, looking up at her with those deep, soulful eyes. His tail wagged slowly, and for a moment, Emily could have sworn he was smiling. "I'll take good care of it," she said, wrapping the scarf gently around her neck. It didn't matter that it was a simple piece of cloth. In that moment, it felt like the most precious gift she had ever received. Shadow had found it somewhere, maybe in the woods or from an abandoned house. Wherever it came from, it was now hers, and it was a token of their unexpected and beautiful friendship. As the day wore on, Emily spent hours with Shadow, talking to him, playing, and simply enjoying each other's company. The bond between them had only deepened. She had started out simply trying to help a stray dog, but now Shadow was more than just a dog. He was her friend, and she had no intention of letting him go. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over everything, Emily felt like her world had shifted. In just a few short days, she had gone from meeting a stray to building a deep and meaningful friendship. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt certain of one thing. Shadow was going to be a part of her life for a long time to come. Days passed, and Emily's bond with Shadow grew stronger. Every afternoon after school, she hurried to the corner of the street, eager to see her loyal friend. She brought him treats, blankets, and little gifts, and in return, Shadow showered her with the kind of affection she had never known from an animal before. There were moments when Emily felt that the connection between them was deeper than simple friendship. It was as though they had been meant to find each other. However, as the days turned into weeks, Emily began to notice something unsettling. The once quiet street, where she had first met Shadow, now seemed to feel different. It was subtle at first. A man walking his dog down the block would glance at her with a strange look, or a car would slow down as it passed, as if trying to see something hidden in the shadows. But it wasn't until the following Tuesday, when she arrived at the corner, that Emily realized something was wrong. As she approached the bush where Shadow often rested, her heart sank. He wasn't there. The familiar area was completely empty, not a trace of him to be found. A cold knot of fear twisted in her stomach as she called out for him, "Shadow, where are you?" She took a few steps forward, looking down the street, scanning for any sign of the dog she had grown so fond of. "Shadow." She called again, louder this time, hoping for an answer. But there was nothing. A heavy feeling settled over her, and her mind raced with worry. Where could he be? He never strayed far from this spot. Had something happened to him? Emily's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, her fingers desperately dialing her parents. She had to find him. Shadow wasn't just a stray dog anymore. He was family. Her parents reassured her that they would help look for him, but Emily knew she couldn't wait. She set out down the block, walking faster, hoping to find a glimpse of Shadow, or at least someone who had seen him. She passed the houses and the familiar alleyways, calling his name, her voice growing more frantic with every step. As she reached the end of the street, a figure appeared in the distance, a man walking briskly toward her. He seemed to be heading in the direction of where she had seen Shadow last. Emily's heart raced as she approached him, her breath coming out in short bursts. "Excuse me, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Have you seen a German Shepherd around here? His name is Shadow. I've been looking for him." The man paused, studying her for a moment before answering. "I saw him yesterday around this area," he said slowly. "But he was acting strange, kind of skittish. Might be someone else's dog now." Emily's heart dropped. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Someone else's dog? Shadow was hers. She had promised him she would take care of him. Her mind raced as she thought of all the worst possibilities. Someone had taken him, or worse, something had happened to him. "Do you know where he might have gone?" she asked urgently, her voice barely above a whisper. The man shook his head. "No idea. But keep an eye out. Some people around here aren't too friendly to strays." The words hit Emily hard. She nodded mutely, feeling the weight of the situation press down on her. She knew there were dangers out there. Stray dogs weren't always welcomed with open arms, but she hadn't imagined Shadow could be in real danger. Now the world around her seemed darker, and her once peaceful search for a friend was now tinged with fear. She thanked the man before turning back toward the street, her mind racing with possibilities. She wouldn't give up on Shadow. She couldn't. He needed her, and she was determined to find him. Emily's worry for Shadow only deepened as the days passed. Every afternoon she rushed to the same corner, hoping to find him waiting for her as he always had. But each time she found nothing but the same empty street and quiet houses. The bush where Shadow used to rest remained undisturbed, and the alleyways she had searched before offered no signs of him. Emily's heart grew heavier with each passing day. The absence of the dog she had come to think of as family left a void in her life, a feeling of emptiness she couldn't shake. Determined not to give up, Emily expanded her search. She told her friends at school about Shadow and asked if anyone had seen him. She posted flyers with his picture around the neighborhood, hoping someone would recognize him and call her. She even visited the local animal shelter, asking if any stray German shepherds had been brought in. But each time, she came home empty-handed, her hope waning just a little more. One afternoon, after another unsuccessful search, Emily returned home feeling defeated. She sat on the porch, staring at the sidewalk, wondering if she would ever see her friend again. She thought about all the places she had searched, all the people she had talked to, and yet Shadow seemed to have vanished without a trace. The uncertainty was almost too much to bear. That evening, Emily's parents noticed the change in her. They had seen how much she cared about Shadow, and they knew how hard this was for her. "You know, sweetheart," her mom said gently as they sat down to dinner. "Sometimes these things take time. You've done everything you can." Emily nodded, but the words didn't make her feel any better. She missed him terribly. She missed the way he had run to her every day, tail wagging and eyes bright with affection. She missed the way they would sit together in the quiet afternoons, sharing a simple, unspoken understanding. Shadow wasn't just a dog to her. He was a friend, a companion, someone who had brought a new kind of joy into her life. The thought of losing him was unbearable. That night after dinner, Emily found herself walking back to the street corner once again. She couldn't let go, not yet. Even if the search seemed hopeless, she had to try. As she walked, her eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, looking for even the faintest sign of Shadow. But there was nothing. She took a deep breath, her eyes stinging from the exhaustion of the search and the pain of uncertainty. She was about to turn and head home when something caught her eye, a flash of movement in the alley behind the old house. Emily's heart leaped. Without a second thought, she hurried toward the alley, calling out, "Shadow." Her voice trembled with anticipation, but it echoed back at her with only silence. Then she saw it. There, just beyond the shadows, was a familiar figure. It was Shadow. He was lying against a brick wall, looking up at her with the same soulful eyes she had missed so much. He looked thinner than before, his fur matted, and his posture weak, but he was alive. Emily's breath caught in her throat, and her legs shook with relief. "Shadow," she cried, her voice choked with emotion. The dog slowly stood up, his movements sluggish but purposeful. His tail wagged faintly, and his eyes locked onto hers with a quiet understanding. Emily ran toward him, her heart soaring as she knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she gently stroked his fur. "I found you," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I never gave up on you." Shadow leaned into her touch, his tired body pressing against hers as if seeking comfort. In that moment, Emily knew that everything would be okay. No matter what had happened to him in the days he had been gone, Shadow was back where he belonged, with her. The search wasn't over, not yet, but Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. Shadow had shown up when she needed him most, and as she held him close, she knew she would never stop fighting to keep him by her side. In the days that followed, Emily's relief turned into a newfound sense of determination. Finding Shadow again, even after such a long and uncertain search, felt like the beginning of something important. As she sat on the porch with him by her side, the cool evening breeze brushing through her hair, Emily realized that Shadow wasn't just a dog to her anymore. He was family. Shadow, although weaker than before, began to regain his strength. With Emily's care and affection, he slowly became more energetic, his tail wagging once again whenever he saw her. She gave him a warm bed in the garage, placed food in front of him every day, and always made sure he had water to drink. Slowly, he started to trust her more. The skittishness that had once defined him was replaced with quiet affection. He rested his head in her lap as she sat on the porch or leaned against her when they took walks around the neighborhood. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when he would flinch at a sudden movement, and Emily could tell he carried the weight of his past with him. But it was a start. A start to a beautiful friendship that she knew would last a lifetime. Emily's parents, seeing how much Shadow had become a part of her life, made a decision they hadn't discussed before. They would keep him. They'd officially adopt him. Emily's heart soared when they gave her the news. It was as if everything had fallen into place. Shadow had found his home, and Emily had found a friend who would always be by her side. That weekend, Emily took Shadow to the local vet for a checkup, just to make sure he was healthy after his time on the streets. The vet confirmed that he was indeed in better shape than he had been, though he still had some minor issues to address, such as weight gain and a few scars on his body. But none of that mattered to Emily. All she cared about was that he was safe and that he was hers. The vet also recommended some basic training to help Shadow adjust further, which Emily happily agreed to. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Shadow grew even closer. She taught him simple commands like sit, stay, and come. And while he wasn't perfect, Shadow showed real progress. The bond between them had transformed into something unshakable, one that was built not just on routine and care, but on the trust and affection they had shared from the very first day they met. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Emily looked at Shadow, his head resting gently on her lap. She smiled softly, running her fingers through his fur. "You know, Shadow," she said quietly, "you saved me as much as I saved you." Shadow lifted his head at the sound of her voice, his eyes meeting hers with that familiar, soulful gaze. It was as if he understood every word. "Thank you," Emily whispered, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. Shadow was no longer just a stray. He was her companion, her protector, and the friend she had always needed. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, Emily knew that life with Shadow was only just beginning. There would be many more walks, many more moments of joy, and undoubtedly some challenges along the way. But together, they could face anything. The two of them, an unlikely pair, had found each other at the perfect time. And from that moment on, they would never be apart again. The little girl's kindness had given Shadow a second chance, and in return, Shadow had given Emily a gift she would cherish forever: unconditional love, loyalty, and a friendship that would last a lifetime.